Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so glad you've joined me for part 2 of our story. We've discovered that the drama mistress that's dearly loved at the school of St. Clair's has gone missing. The question is, why has she vanished? We're about to find out. So let's continue with part 2 of our story. Charlotte looked at her father scathingly, with her defiant hands now parked on her hips. Dad, name one of those so-called reasons you're talking about. Why wouldn't Mum turn up for her rehearsals? Don't you get it, Dad? Mum's clearly in trouble. She could have been abducted, even kidnapped. She could be in an accident of some kind. She could have had a heart attack or a stroke. Anything could have happened to her. Mum needs us, Dad. We've got to find her. If the police won't do anything, then we've got to find her. Goodness gracious me, Charlotte. Your mother's only been missing for a few hours, and you're envisaging the worst-case scenario. Imagine how silly you're going to feel if she walks through that door right now, which I have to tell you is a very distinct possibility. But, Dad, don't you get it? This is the age of cell phones, isn't it? We tend to use them when we're in a spot of trouble, don't we? The first thing Mum would do if she was waylaid would be to contact us. She would also get in touch with her drama pupils at St. Clair's, wouldn't she? To tell them she wasn't going to show up for rehearsals. But she never contacted anyone, and this is not like her at all. Charlotte, I'm as worried as you are about your mother. But unlike you, I'm not going to panic, not yet. If your mother has been in an accident, we'd have been contacted already by the police. They're very efficient about that sort of thing. Her identification is on her person. Dad, I can't believe you're talking like this. Don't you get it? Said Charlotte, looking at her father in indignation. This is not the way Mum behaves, Dad. It's not her character. She would have contacted us. Sweetheart, any manner of things could have happened to your mother. She could have mislaid her cell phone. That happens too, you know. Maybe it's not charged. Maybe she's so busy she lost track of time. Maybe she couldn't get a signal on her phone. Maybe she's not feeling well and has decided to book into a hotel room for a rest. Oh, Dad, you sound ridiculous. Why on earth would she do something like that? Dad, what's going on? Is there something you're not telling me? Why do I get the distinct feeling there is something you're not telling me? No, of course not, love. I can't think what you're talking about. I'm as clueless as you are to the whereabouts of your mother. But unlike you, I'm not going to panic about it. Not yet, at least. Your mother hasn't been away for that long. I'm not sure where she is. But I was just covering some of the things that might have occurred to her, which might explain why she's not been in touch, that's all. You look pretty cagey, Dad. I'm sorry to say, but you do. Almost as if you're hiding something. You do know where Mum is, don't you? Oh, my God, you haven't done something to her, have you? Enough, Charlotte. Listen to yourself. I'm your father. Do you think I'm capable of hurting your mother? Of course not. I might remind you, I'm the only member of this entire family that even refuses to kill a fly. But in summer, you're the one, Charlotte, squatting them within an inch of their lives, boasting that you've killed 100 of the things. I'm sorry, Dad. That came out all wrong, I admit it. I know you could never hurt Mum. But, Dad, I'm just looking at every case scenario, and you're behaving... I'm behaving like what, Charlotte? Go on, say it. Well, you're not concerned as you should be, Dad. Come on, you know this is incongruous behaviour for Mum not to turn up for rehearsals. You're acting all nonchalant about it. What are you hiding, Dad? All right. I admit there is something I haven't told you, said Mr. Paisley, lifting up his hand in surrender. You know sometimes your mother can overreact. Like the time when she marched out of the hospital, when she ran away from her breast reduction surgery. If you remember, she got herself into quite the panic. Took herself away for a long drive, didn't she? She didn't bother getting in touch with any one of us. No one knew where the hell she was. I think your mother had terrifying visions of the surgeons trying to locate her, dragging her back to the surgery, kicking and screaming, and cutting her up into tiny pieces. Do you remember how terrified she was? I was the one that found her drinking herself silly at a bar 2 hours outside of Seattle, after the bar manager insisted on calling me on her behalf because he knew she couldn't drink and drive. Your mother deliberately avoided getting in touch. She was worried I'd be as mad as a hatter with her for running away from the operation, which she wanted in the first place. I'd been the one actively discouraging her from going under the knife for years on end. I don't trust those cosmetic surgeons. Never have, never will. Everything they do is for money. If the truth be told, I was bloody glad she didn't go through with it. Yes, but Dad, that was different. Mum was in a dreadful state. She was terrified out of her wits. If you remember, she was convinced she was going to die on the operation table, that the surgeons were going to accidentally perforate her lungs or something. The night before her surgery, she'd been reading up about people's botched up, disfigured bodies after surgery. People who had died on the table during a procedure due to the incompetence of the surgeon. I think her reaction was understandable in the circumstances, don't you? She was afraid. She was so upset that even though she had been prepped for surgery, she ran away from the hospital like a cowering animal, avoiding the slaughter. But this is a whole different ball game, Dad. I mean, Mum isn't running away from anything, is she? Mr. Paisley looked awkward. His face flushed as red as a field of poppies. Is it a whole different ball game, Charlotte? I'm not so sure. Your mother can sometimes react dramatically, in ways that is not always normal, which is what I suspect she's done. When she behaves like this, her prudence tends to fly out of the window. Charlotte stared at her father. Oh, Dad, what happened? You've got to tell me. Well, I have to say, love, that me and your mother had a bit of a barney at lunchtime, when she popped over to the house at about 1:30 this afternoon. Dad, I don't believe you. I've been worried sick about Mum's whereabouts, and you dismiss this crucial bit of information that might actually stop me from having a panic attack. You're only now bothering to announce that you had an argument with Mum. Did you upset her? Mr. Paisley hung his head in shame, rather like the family dog that had chewed up the sofa and had to face the gravity of his crime from his less than enamoured owners. I will admit your mother was decidedly upset. She left the house in quite the huff, I have to say, slamming the door behind her so loudly that she practically made me jump out of my skin. Let's just say she didn't leave the house quietly. She was in a right bad mood. But, Dad, what was the argument about? I need to know. Mr. Paisley shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. It was nothing major. You know what your mother's like. She's so quick to overreact, to make a mountain out of a molehill. But, Dad, what happened? Stop speaking in riddles, for goodness sake. Well, your mother had been on a bit of a shopping spree that morning. She didn't have any lessons to teach at St. Clair's. And you know how extravagant your mother can be at times. Sometimes she seems completely incapable of curbing her spending. She went completely ballistic on the credit card, spending a sizable fortune on an outfit for June Springfield's wedding next year. And I'm sorry, but I draw the line in spending a fortune on an outfit that your mother cannot even fit into. That, to me, is insanely ridiculous. What do you mean she can't fit into it, Dad? I mean, love, your mother spent our hard-earned money on a frivolous dress that cost an arm and a leg, 2 sizes too small for her. Your mother assured me she was going to lose weight for June Springfield's wedding, so that she can fit into that dress. She said that buying a smaller size would give her motivation to lose the weight. She's done this before, Charlotte. I'm sure you know that. I told your mother to take the dress right back to the boutique, to swap it for a dress that actually fit her, and then I would be happy, and we would say no more about the matter. I told her in no uncertain terms that she was living in a fool's paradise if she thought she'd shed all that weight in time for June's wedding. Your mother was furious with me, spitting fire she was, making out that I was being completely unreasonable. What are you saying, Reggie? Are you telling me you have no faith in my ability to lose weight? You think I can't slim down, is that it? That I have no self-discipline or control? It's not that I don't have faith in you, love. Far from it. But the human body is a complicated affair. If it was so easy to lose weight, the world wouldn't have an obesity problem. The human body does everything it can to conserve energy. I heard that somewhere. Science has proved that even exercise helps very little with weight loss. I think you're setting yourself up unreasonable expectations. The last time you were the size of that dress was when you were at senior high. You can't possibly expect to be that size again. You're being far too idealistic. Are you saying I'm fat and old? Is that what you're saying, Reggie? Go on. I dare you to say it. I'm not saying anything of the kind. But what I am saying, love, is that you are being completely unrealistic. Your expectations are far too high. I mean, look at me, for example. My weight has been pretty stable over the years, and yet I'm still not the same size myself as I was when I was at senior high. But unlike you, I'm realistic enough to know I will unlikely to be that size again. So what are you saying, Reggie? You think I'm delusional, is that it? You really don't believe I've got the willpower and resolve to fit into this dress for the wedding? Why are you going around in circles, love? I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm telling you that there is a high probability of failure when it comes to your diet, that you will not fit in that dress. I don't mind spending a sizable amount of money on a dress if you love it so much, but I resent that kind of expenditure if you're never going to wear it. And believe me, love, you will not be wearing that dress for her wedding. Why? Because you won't fit into it, that's why. So that's what this is about, Reggie. You're angry with me for spending so much money on myself. How dare you? I work very hard for a living, to bring money to the table, and for once in my life I think I'm entitled to spoil myself a little, don't you? But no, you can't stand it, can you? You can't bear it when I spend money on myself. It really bothers you, doesn't it, Reginald? Reginald sighed. Well, if you must know, love, it bothers me when you're wasteful. I do think you're extravagant. You're a bit of a shopaholic, and I'm sorry, but it needs to be said. I've not had the heart to say this to you before, Emma, but enough is enough. This frivolity and reckless, irrational spending has got to stop. There are dozens of brand new clothes hanging in your wardrobe that you've never worn a day in your life. They've still got the labels on. Why is that? Because you can't fit into them. And some of them you brought on an impulsive whim in the hope that one day you might just fit into them. But to date, this mysterious supernatural weight loss you believe is coming your way has not happened. It's all fanciful, love. Pie in the sky. I don't like to see our hard-earned money going down the drain, wasted so senselessly. How dare you, Reginald, speak to me in this way? You're incredibly mean. If I want to buy clothes that don't fit me, I'm entitled to do just that. I've earned half this money, I'd like to remind you. And what I do with it is none of your damn business. I don't pick on you if you buy a sweater that I don't like. It is my business, love. I beg to disagree. We earn money as a team, don't we? Our money we pool together collectively as a couple. I like to invest it wisely, not spend it uselessly, on something completely redundant. And by the way, if I bought a sweater for myself that you personally did not like, I would take it back at once, no questions asked, because I respect your opinion. How dare you speak to me like this, Reginald? I can't believe how dreadfully unkind you're being. And you're the one that's being unreasonable, not me. I'm not being unkind, Emma. I'm trying to make you see sense. There is a difference. Your mother, I'm afraid, Charlotte, was very angry with me. She was in tears. I really seemed to have pressed the wrong buttons with her. We exchanged some unpleasantries, and then she flew out of the house, got into her white Peugeot to escape from me, and accelerated down the drive at one hell of a speed to make a statement, I suspect. I cannot recall a time I saw her this angry. Oh, my goodness, Dad! Now this makes perfect sense to me. Mum is really upset. That's why she barged off in the way she did. Did she say where she was going? Well, I can't remember it all, love. It wasn't pretty, let's just say. She told me I was a prize cad who didn't understand her when I told her to calm down, that we could talk about this. She didn't want to listen. She sashayed through the house like a wild wind, and she told me in no uncertain terms that she never wanted to speak to me ever again, as long as she lived. In truth, I don't think me and your mother have had such a feisty argument like that for many years. I felt, Charlotte, that the truth needed to be told. I just cannot bear to see our good, hard-earned money wasted on high-end extravagant things that Emma does not need. I mean, I want your mother to be happy, of course I do. And I'm quite happy for her to spoil herself. I believe we all need spoiling from time to time. But I felt I had to put my foot down in the circumstances. I mean, buying such an expensive over-the-top dress for a wedding that we will be attending in a year's time is all well and good, if the dress actually fits you. But buying one 2 sizes too small is an extravagant waste of money. I knew what would happen with that dress, love. It would go into early retirement like so many of her other abandoned clothes, and hang in that closet neglected for years, a miserable reminder of another girl not reached. Who needs that in their lives to discourage them? Isn't life hard enough already? You're right, Dad. Absolutely right, Charlotte agreed. I'm sorry, Dad, if I flew off the handle with you, but I was so dreadfully worried about Mum. My guess is she stormed out of the house, and you know what she's like when she's mad. It's the only time she throws her common sense out of the window, like a discarded apple core. She's probably driven right out of Seattle to the countryside, like she did that time before, when she ran away from that breast reduction operation that she couldn't go through with. She's just furious with you. But I'm sure she'll simmer down. She'll be back once the water's settled. I just wish, Dad, you'd told me this before I sounded the panic button. I'm sorry, love. I should have told you, I know. But I felt rather ashamed of myself for laying it all on so thick with your mother. I probably shouldn't have been so hard on her. The way I see it, Dad, is Mum's the unreasonable one, not you. We'll give her 24 hours to come to her senses. Honestly, she shouldn't have overreacted like this. Well, your mother isn't a drama queen for nothing, is she, love? And to be fair, that's why I love her so much. The world would be a lot smaller place without her in it. That is for sure. The evening had passed with a slow drudgery, without Mrs. Paisley's effervescent presence, as both father and daughter had few words this evening to say to each other, as they tucked into their takeaway pizzas they'd ordered, and settled down to watch a movie together. Both were hoping to hear the familiar sound of Mrs. Paisley's white Toyota rolling up the driveway, the door being opened, keys being rattled, and the familiar sound of Mrs. Paisley's patent leather shoes tapping across the hallway as she navigated her way towards the kitchen. But it never happened. Charlotte felt decidedly sorry for her father, as he looked rather downcast this evening. His eyes were locked up in a faraway look that was ridden with regret about having spoken in haste. It was true. He was now repenting in leisure, lightly wishing he could undo the conversations he'd had with his wife, like the drop stitches in your grandmother's knitting. Charlotte suspected that he was secretly chastising himself. The truth was, Charlotte wholeheartedly agreed with her father on this issue, so it was hard for her to be angry with him, as she would have taken his side in this argument. She was actually proud of her father for standing up to her mother and finally putting his foot down, which he should have done a long time ago. Much as she adored her mother, Charlotte knew very well that Emma Paisley was a bit of a spendthrift and loved indulging herself in buying ludicrously expensive things that she was unlikely to ever wear. And this was something that had always bothered Charlotte, who hated waste of any kind, and really believed that humanity was pilfering the planet with their insane, needless extravagances, which she believed were created around the human ego. People like that are caught up in the matrix. She believed our world is a simulation, and you're stuck if you're caught up in the web of materialism, and the only way you can ever set yourself free is not being a slave to it. Helen was an environmentalist in many regards, with a zealous passion for the ocean and all its beloved creatures, and she had seen what the oil spills had done to the ocean, its habitat, and all the wild animals, all in the name of greed, where the fat cats in our world were gluttonously hungry to fill the bowels of their life with even more showy things, and their bank vaults with an excess of money they would never get to use in their entire lifetimes. And for what? Charlotte could not comprehend. One evening when Charlotte had stayed over with her best friend Jellica, she had been absolutely mortified to see Jellica's mother trashing perfectly good food because it was a day over the sell-by date, when there was nothing wrong with it at all. Things like that irked her greatly. She abhorred senseless waste in a world where children in Africa were dying of starvation, even though that may sound like a cliché. She also despised the great big discrepancies between the haves and the have-nots in our society, and she thought it was grossly obscene to own sparkling opulent yachts in the Mediterranean, a host of fancy over-the-top sports cars, and several grandiose mansions in all parts of the globe. Then there were people like Bill Gates, buying an excess of land, and for what? Who needed so much? And at the end of the day, were these people even happier having so much more than anyone else? Charlotte doubted it very much, as some of the richest kids in her own school were conspicuously to her the most miserable. It's sickening, Charlotte would say. What's wrong with these gluttonous, greedy fat cats? Why are they exploiting the world's resources with their excessive greed? Why can't they be happy with a couple of cars and a house? Nobody needs excess.
I'm sorry, love, said Mr. Paisley apologetically. This is all my fault. Your mother not being at home, I mean. I think I really upset her this time. Me and your mother, we never fight as a general rule. But I was so frustrated about all this needless spending. It's not just the money, you know. It's the waste. I mean, perfectly good clothes lying in a corpse of a wardrobe indefinitely, where they'll never rise from the dead.
Dad, didn't I just tell you a moment ago? I don't blame you at all for this. You told Mum what she needed to hear, and I'm proud of you for that. She didn't like it one bit, and swanned off in a huff. But you know what, Dad? Sometimes you have to tell people the truth, even if it's not what they want to hear. Mum will come round in the end, and you never know. You might have helped her see some sense along the way.
Well, I hope so, love. But you know your mother. She can be like a bear with a sore head at times.
Before long, Charlotte slumped casually on the couch. She fell into a deep sleep, while the television remained on. Her father had long since retired to bed. Then she noticed her father's cell phone was ringing on the coffee table. She decided to inspect it. It might be her mother, she thought. Charlotte reached out to grab the phone, and noticed it was indeed her mother's cell phone, calling. So she quickly answered it. "Mum! Is that you, Mum? Where the hell are you? We've been worried sick about you. You need to come home at once."
"Sorry, ma'am. This is not your mother speaking, I'm afraid. But I suspect she must be the owner of this cell phone."
"Oh, my God! Has my mother been in an accident or something? Is that what you're saying? Otherwise, why is a perfect stranger speaking to me on her cell?"
"Ma'am, you've got your wires crossed. My name is Todd Wendcroft. I manage the bar here at the Horse and Hound, and as far as I'm concerned, the owner of this cell phone is perfectly fine. Well, she was when she left the bar about 2 hours ago. I haven't seen her since. I believe her name is Emma Paisley, as that's the name on her driving license here. She's a voluptuous woman, isn't she? Auburn hair, fair skin, dresses quite bohemian. Lovely floaty silky dress and big earrings.
That's right. That's her. That's my mother.
Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm afraid it would seem your mother left her purse and her cell phone behind in the bar. Someone handed it in to me. She hasn't come back to collect it. So I took the liberty of inspecting the contents for myself. I thought I would phone a family member. Her cell phone is not locked. To let someone know that her purse is at our bar, in case Emma is wondering where she left it.
There was an awkward pause for a moment.
I'm very concerned, ma'am, I have to say, because there's a lot of money in her wallet here, and I wouldn't want it to get stolen. I think there is $800 in her wallet, ma'am. That's a hell of a lot of money to be carrying around loose like this. I didn't know people carry that amount of cash around these days. Ostensibly, she's got her whole life here in her purse. I imagine losing this money would be very inconvenient for her, and very expensive to boot. So I thought you would like to know the purse is safely in my hands. She just needs to ask for Mr. Woodcroft, and I will keep it safely for her in the bar safe, until she picks it up herself.
I'm very grateful for you, Mr. Woodcroft, getting in contact with me like this. Well, this is actually my father's phone, but I appreciate it so very much.
It's not a problem, ma'am. As I was saying, I'm concerned about your mother losing her purse. I wouldn't want it getting in the wrong hands, if you get my drift. There's nothing more frustrating than not knowing where you left something. I think her house keys are in the purse, if I'm not mistaken. So I suspect when she does get home, she'll find she's locked herself out.
Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her mother had gone to some bar to drown her sorrows, when she should have been responsible and orchestrating the rehearsals for murder on the Orient Express at St. Clair's. Her inability to let everybody know where she was had left everyone with much disquiet. A whole drama class had been grievously concerned for her welfare. Honestly, why had her mother selfishly been behaving like this? She must have been grievously upset with her father to just go medicating herself with alcohol. Why would she do such a nonsensical thing? Charlotte was reminded that the very same set of circumstances had transpired when her mother had run away from a breast reduction surgery. She had been found in a bar outside of Seattle, drinking alcohol to anaesthetize her anxiety. So this was not the first time this had happened, but she hoped it would be her last. Honestly, what the hell was her mother thinking? So my mother was at your bar, Mr. Woodcroft?
That's right, but she left a while ago, as I was saying.
How long was she there at your bar? Do you remember? My mother's the kind of woman people notice, you know.
Well, you're not wrong about that, ma'am. She was here for a long time, I'm afraid. She also was inebriated, but as you can imagine, she made quite the impression on everyone. Quite the charmer, your mother is. Had everyone in stitches of laughter when she started to play the part of Hercule Poirot in Murder of the Orient Express, on the Orient Express, sorry. I don't think I've seen anybody laugh as much in our bar for a long time. 1 minute she was there, but then she promptly vanished. I thought she'd gone to the powder room or something. I think she drove away in a hurry before I had a chance to stop her, in her white Peugeot, I believe it was. Just so you know, ma'am, I consider it my responsibility to always ensure that I never let people drive home drunk. You cannot be too careful, ma'am. A drunk person on the road is like a loaded pistol. I've seen the damage myself when people drive drunk. I always make our customers get alternative transportation. Sometimes I drive them home myself in the minivan, which works out reasonably well. I also do have a spare room upstairs for anybody who is very, very drunk that they can use overnight. I was actually going to suggest this to your mother before she left, but she slipped through my fingers like butter. I have to be honest with you, ma'am. I wasn't completely comfortable of the thought of her driving with a little bit too much alcohol in her system. As far as I know, there's been no accidents reported on our roads, so I assume she must have got home safely."
"But she never came home. We've been worried sick about her. She never bothered to even tell us where she was. How did she seem when she first arrived at your bar?"
"Well, she appeared upset. She was wittering on about things. She mentioned she'd had a blowout with her husband. He didn't like her buying a dress that was too small for her or something. He told her she'd never fit into it. She was complaining about that a lot, describing her husband as a loser. It wasn't very pretty, I have to say."
"Whereabouts is your bar located? How far are you from Seattle?"
"Goodness gracious me! Are you in Seattle? That's a long way away. I just assumed your mother lived in the next town."
"Well, whereabouts is your bar?"
"Well, we're about 3 hours outside of Seattle. It's very countrified around here, quite rural. I can send you the address if you like. Your mother was noticed in our bar as not being a regular. No one had ever seen her before. I expect if you live so far away, she could be on the highway by now. I'm sure she will be with you soon. Either that or maybe she's done the sensible thing and booked herself into a hotel overnight. I hope she's done that. I would strongly recommend to her, if I were you, not to go driving under the influence ever again. It's a reckless thing to do. But sometimes when people have had a little too much to drink, they tend to persuade themselves that their senses are still very sharp, when they are not. I see this all the time with my locals, you know. You can cause fatalities on the road, and if you get arrested by the police, it's a prison sentence. I just hope your mother gets back safe and sound, ma'am. But let me just say, she must never do this again."
"Exactly how drunk was my mother? I can't believe no one stopped her from driving in her condition."
"Well, love, I have to tell you that she would have been stopped from driving if anybody in the bar had actually known that she intended to drive away. Apparently she claimed to need to go to her car to get something, but then her car just literally left the parking lot, so she did drive away. But I think, to be fair, she possibly could have walked in a straight line. She just seemed, you know, a little uninhibited, if you know what I mean. But if you're wondering if I think she could drive home in her condition, I think so. But it's just not advised to drink and drive, if you get my point. She was tiddly, but not over the top."
"Well, thank you for phoning, Mr. Woodcroft. I really, really appreciate it." As Charlotte put down the phone, she knew she needed to go after her mother to see if she could locate her whereabouts. Emma Paisley. Emma Paisley was absolutely furious. Her husband's words burned her like a steak being flung on a hot grill. She knew she wanted to get the hell away from him. She wanted him to really regret his mean words that he had spurted at her so unkindly, off the cuff like that. She should never have left the bag from the boutique on the kitchen counter of all things. But she knew that hiding it away in front of her husband's discerning eyes would have drawn attention to the package, as he would have known that she had something to hide. And unfortunately Reginald Paisley could read her like a book.
"What's that you have there, love?"
her husband had asked, eyeing the glamorous-looking bag with the boutique's logo on it, with a degree of suspicion on his face.
"Oh, it's absolutely nothing," she said, waving her hand nonchalantly. "It's just a scarf, you know, that I picked up, that's all. It caught my eye. Got it for a bargain. It was on the sale. Awfully cheap it was."
Her husband studied her for a brief moment, through narrowing eyes, as if he didn't believe a word of it, as if she was failing to call his bluff. He cleared his throat and said gingerly,
"As long as you haven't broken the bank, love, that's all I care about."
Emma rolled her eyes.
"What are you like, Reginald? Of course I didn't break the bank. What do you take me for, love? How about I get some lunch for us?" she said, eager to change the subject. "I've got some superb ham and some delicious potato salad and coleslaw. How does that sound? I bought it from that lovely delicatessens in town. You know, the new one that's just opened. I gather it's an Italian owner, and oh my word, you don't know how delicious the stuff is they have on sale there. The place was packed. Everybody wanted to buy everything. You couldn't blame them. I couldn't resist buying you the most delicious-looking cheesecake for dessert." "Well, it sounds good. Well, lovely, actually," said Reginald, watching his wife industriously busy herself around the kitchen, removing the packaging from the groceries that she had bought at the delicatessens, and laying them out on the kitchen table for lunch. It was a delicious-looking spread. "Let's put this away, shall we?" said her husband, picking up the boutique bag, glancing briefly inside, and Emma quickly scuttled towards him to grab the bag away from him. "Oh, let me put that away, shall I?" she said hurriedly. "You're right, we don't want to get the food on my beautiful scarf, do we? I'll take it up to the bedroom right now." Reginald held up his hand. "Not so fast, love. You're behaving evasively. And if you don't mind my saying so, this package is far too big for a scarf. What are you hiding from me, love? What are you not telling me? I think it has something to do with what you've actually bought at that exclusive boutique for yourself. Something you don't want me to know about. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Reginald. What would I have to hide from you?" "We'll find out, shall we?" said Reginald. "I'm going to look at what you bought," he said, shuffling through the tissue paper. "And let me just say, Emma, this does not look like a scarf to me," he said, pulling out the dress to examine it closely. "Beautiful fabric, I must say. But this is not a scarf. It's a dress." "All right, I lied," admitted Emma. "I know what you're like, Reginald, when I go shopping, that's all. You're always inclined to think I'm extravagant. I thought if I told you it was a scarf, that would shut you up." "But you are extravagant, love. Don't tell me something I already know. I'd like to have a closer look at this dress of yours, if I may. I'm intrigued as to what you're hiding from me, love. I have a sense that this dress was not on sale, was it?" Emma's heart dipped when her husband inspected the label on the dress, looking up at her in abject astonishment. She predicted his reaction, and it came like a brick being flung into her face. $1,000, he said aghast, looking at his wife in bewilderment through his steely grey eyes. "You've paid $1,000 for a dress? Are you insane? No wonder you didn't want me to see it. You knew I would completely lose it." "You're right. I knew you would react like this, Reginald. That's why I told you it was a scarf. If you must know, it's a dress for the wedding we're going to next year, of one of my ex-drama pupils. I thought it would be perfect for the occasion. I want to look my best at the wedding. It's terribly glamorous, don't you think?" So there we are. That is the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. And somehow I feel sorry for Emma Paisley, because she's about to be in the doghouse. So let's see you tomorrow night then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.